Jack Posobiec, Euro Dispatch, day 2. And folks, what can I say? Massive news from President Trump. The hammer has been dropped across Europe with a 3-pronged hit directed from the White House, but also with some hits being directed elsewhere. Today, Scott Bessent arrived in Kiev for a meeting with Vladimir Zelensky, and his work with Zelensky was directed towards an economic partnership contingent on the end of the war. And of course, we know that he was talking about those rare earth minerals as well as other resources in Ukraine that could be used for the U.S. economy and potentially as a way to backstop and back pay for some of the billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money that had gone to fund the Ukrainian war effort under Joe Biden. Many of those loans never to be paid back. But then Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth across Europe in Brussels giving a blistering speech saying that the war will end, but we will not return to the status quo, where Ukraine would be pushed into NATO, that in fact the door would be closed for Ukraine into NATO, that there would not be a return to the 2014 borders, that instead a new peace, a lasting peace, and an understandable peace would take place on the European continent, upon which I am now, your humble host, reporting to you from. So we've seen a massive response, the ripples effect from the ministers of defense across Brussels, and then all of this leading towards the Munich Security Conference this weekend, where Zelensky and J.D. Vance will have their meeting, their first ever sit down. This is tremendous, ladies and gentlemen. We're seeing real change. We are seeing an actual work from the president, huge action from President Trump directing his envoys across Europe to end the Ukrainian war. But then, after all of this took place, while Bessent was meeting with Zelensky, President Trump himself elected to make a phone call and hold a phone call with Vladimir Putin directly in Russia. Trump then released on Truth Social a readout of his own call, saying that they had a long and productive conversation between himself and the president of Russia. They talked about the need to end the war. He talked about the sacrifices that Russia and America both made in World War II. He talked about the need for common sense and said that Vladimir Putin himself also agreed on the ideal of common sense, the campaign theme in many ways of Trump 2024. Perhaps most significantly, not only did President Trump work on a deal to say he wanted to end the war, but it also seems that he was aiming at renormalizing relations with Russia and the West, saying that he wanted to continue to work together with Russia in areas where it made sense, and committed to not only inviting Putin to the United States, but also that President Trump himself would be making a state visit to Russia. Monumental news, something that in the first term, frankly, would have been unthinkable. But as we say, we are going to do things that have never been done. And this has been a refrain in Europe for a long time from a lot of people, a lot of skeptics looking at the Ukraine war, saying, how is it that the US and Russia can simply end this war, but not have to pick it up in the next couple of years if there's a Democrat administration that gets back in, or if there is no normalization of peace between Russia and the West? President Trump is now looking to take it upon his shoulders, and his alone, with his envoys, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, Scott Bessent, your Vice President, Secretary of Defense, and Secretary of the Treasury, to work out an economic and security peace between not just Ukraine and Russia, but Russia and the entire West, with President Trump potentially working himself to make that trip to Russia, likely Moscow, the same way that he traveled to North Korea by himself, meeting with Kim Jong-un in the first administration. Folks, what we're seeing right now come out of Europe is nothing short of fantastic. This news for peace is incredible. MAGA world peace is on the table, and President Trump is delivering for the American people and for the people of the world. World War III has been canceled.